The first serve cracked through the morning air like a gunshot, sharp enough to make everyone on the private tennis court turn their heads at once. What they saw next made them laugh, whisper, and judge without mercy. A powerful CEO in crisp white sportswear stood confidently on one side of the net, while on the other stood a man in worn sneakers, borrowed shorts, and hands roughened by years of cleaning floors. He was the building's janitor, a single father no one ever noticed, and in that moment, he looked painfully out of place. No one knew that within the next hour, that same crowd would fall into stunned silence, their laughter choking in their throats as a buried truth rose to the surface and changed everything. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength of people the world overlooks, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that dignity often hides where pride refuses to look. The man on the court was named Arav, though most people in the glass and steel corporate tower only knew him as the janitor who arrived before sunrise and left long after dark. He scrubbed bathrooms no one wanted to enter, polished floors people dirtied without a thought, and emptied trash bins filled with leftovers from meetings that decided million-dollar deals. He did all of it silently, with his head slightly bowed, because silence was safer. Silence did not invite questions about why a man with intelligent eyes and disciplined posture was pushing a mop instead of sitting in a corner office. At home, Arav's world was small but heavy. A cramped apartment with peeling paint, a single bedroom he shared with his young daughter, and a kitchen where he stretched groceries until the end of the month through careful planning and sacrifice. His wife had passed away years earlier after a sudden illness, leaving him with grief that never fully healed and a child who depended on him for everything. Every night, after finishing his shift, he helped his daughter with homework under a flickering light, cooked simple meals, and told her stories about courage and patience. He never spoke of his own exhaustion because love, to him, meant endurance without complaint. The CEO, Ria Malhotra, lived in a very different world. She was young, sharp, and known for her ruthless efficiency. She had inherited a struggling company and turned it into a thriving empire through bold decisions and an iron will. Her name appeared in business magazines. Her schedule was booked months in advance, and people either admired her or feared her. That morning, she had organized a charity sports event for executives and investors, partly for publicity and partly for her own enjoyment. Tennis was her favorite game, a place where she felt in control, where precision and dominance mattered. When Arav was asked to clean the tennis court area before the event, he worked quietly as always, careful not to disrupt the preparations. He moved like someone used to being invisible. During a break, one of the executives jokingly tossed him a racket, nudging him toward the court as laughter rippled through the group. It was meant as entertainment, a harmless joke in their eyes. Someone made a loud comment about how the janitor should try his luck, and in the careless cruelty of privilege, the moment snowballed. Ria, half amused and half dismissive, made an offhand remark that echoed across the court. If he could beat her in a single set, she would do something outrageous, something people would talk about. The words came out light, playful, almost mocking, and the crowd reacted with laughter and phones discreetly raised to capture the moment. Arav stood still, embarrassment creeping up his spine, but something deeper stirred inside him too, something long buried and rarely acknowledged. He had not picked up a tennis racket in years, not since life had forced him to trade courts and competition for responsibility and survival. Once, long ago, tennis had been his passion. He had trained relentlessly, waking before dawn, pushing his body until it trembled, chasing a dream that promised recognition and stability. But dreams cost money, and when his family faced hardship, he had stepped away without bitterness, telling himself that some victories were invisible. Under the weight of the crowd's gaze, Arav almost refused. Pride urged him to walk away, to return to his mop and bucket where humiliation was quieter. But then he thought of his daughter, of the lessons he tried to teach her about courage, about standing up even when the odds were cruel. Slowly, with hands that did not shake as much as people expected, he took the racket. The first few points went exactly as everyone predicted. Rhea moved with practiced ease, her strokes clean and confident, while Arav adjusted to the unfamiliar feel of the court beneath his feet. Laughter continued, and some people turned away, already bored. But then something changed. Arav's posture straightened. His footwork became deliberate. His eyes sharpened with focus. Muscle memory awakened, and the rhythm he had once lived by returned like a forgotten language. The crowd began to quiet as rallies grew longer. Balls that should have been easy points came back with surprising speed and accuracy. Arav's movements were not flashy, but they were efficient, grounded, and precise. Each return chipped away at the assumptions hovering in the air. Rhea's smile tightened as she realized this was no joke match anymore. Her competitive instincts flared, and she pushed harder, refusing to be embarrassed. Sweat trickled down Arav's temples and his lungs burned, but beneath the physical strain was a calm he had not felt in years. This court, this challenge, stripped away the labels that had suffocated him. He was not a janitor or a charity case. He was simply a man playing the game he loved, measured only by skill and determination. As the score edged closer, whispers replaced laughter. Phones were no longer raised for mockery but for disbelief. Rhea's frustration was visible now, not because she was losing, but because the narrative she had unconsciously written was unraveling. When the final point ended in Arav's favor, the silence was absolute, heavy enough to press against everyone's chest. Arav did not celebrate. He lowered the racket gently, as if afraid the moment might shatter. Rhea stood frozen, staring at him not with anger, but with something closer to shock and curiosity. The joke she had made earlier now hung between them, stripped of humor and exposed for its arrogance. The crowd waited, uncertain, embarrassed, and suddenly aware of their own behavior. What happened next had nothing to do with tennis. As people murmured, someone from the organizing committee recognized Arav. A former sports journalist, now graying and quiet, stepped forward with trembling recognition. He remembered a young athlete whose career had once been full of promise, whose name had briefly flickered in national rankings before disappearing without explanation. The realization spread slowly, like a ripple through still water. Arav's past emerged not as a boast, but as an explanation. He had walked away to care for his family, to support a sick wife, to raise a child alone when life demanded sacrifice over glory. There was no scandal, no failure, only choices made in love. The crowd's discomfort deepened, because his story mirrored a truth they often ignored, that success is not always visible, and worth is not measured by titles or paychecks. Rhea listened, her expression softening in a way few had ever seen. The janitor she had mocked was suddenly a mirror, reflecting the cost of ambition and the fragility of judgment. She felt the weight of her words, the careless power of them, and for the first time that morning, control slipped from her grasp. The event ended not with applause, but with quiet reflection. Arav returned the racket and went back to his duties, though his hands felt lighter somehow. He did not expect apologies or offers, and he certainly did not expect his life to change overnight. But something had shifted. People looked at him differently, spoke to him with respect, and some avoided his eyes altogether, ashamed. In the days that followed, Rhea could not forget the match or the man. She reviewed security footage under the pretense of logistics, watching his movements, his restraint, his dignity. She learned about his daughter, his schedule, the way he never took sick days because he could not afford to. The story gnawed at her, not as guilt alone, but as a challenge to the identity she had built on winning at all costs. Change came quietly. Arav was offered a role managing the company's sports and wellness programs, a position that valued his experience and discipline. It was not charity, it was recognition. He accepted with cautious gratitude, aware that trust takes time to rebuild, especially when pride has been bruised. Months later, on the same tennis court, there was another match. This time, There was no crowd hungry for spectacle, no mocking laughter. Just two people, equals now, playing under the open sky. The game was slower, thoughtful, and filled with respect. The bet that had once been a joke transformed into a promise of something deeper, not of marriage born from humiliation, but of connection forged through humility and growth. Before this story ends, take a moment to comment below and tell us what part moved you the most, or share your own experience of being underestimated. Your words might inspire someone who needs to feel seen today. Arav's daughter watched from the sidelines, her eyes shining with pride as she saw her father not as the tired man who came home late, but as someone whole, recognized and valued. Ria watched too, understanding that leadership was not about dominance, but about learning when to step back and listen. The secret that had frozen the crowd was never about hidden fame or lost fortune. It was about unseen strength, about the quiet heroism of choosing love over applause. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you to look twice at the people around you and to measure kindness before judgment, please like this video, share it, and stay connected with the channel. Stories like these live on through your support, and together, we can keep telling them.